They threw her clothes onto the driveway in black trash bags, laughing as she walked away in the rain. To Brandon and his arrogant family, Natalie was just a penniless orphan housewife who dragged down their social status. They mocked her silence, mistook her patience for weakness, and divorced her to make room for a younger, wealthier woman who promised to save their failing family business. But they made one fatal calculation. They didn't check who actually owned the bank holding their debt. They didn't know that the mute maid they just kicked out was the elusive CEO of Orion Global. And by the time they found out, it was already too late to beg. The sound of porcelain shattering against the imported Italian marble floor echoed through the Preston estate. "Look at what you've done!" Patricia screamed, her voice shrill enough to peel the expensive beige paint off the walls. "Do you know how much that vase cost? That is a Ming Dynasty replica, you clumsy, useless girl." Natalie didn't flinch. She simply knelt, picking up the jagged shards of blue and white pottery with her bare hands. She had been married to Brandon Preston for 3 years, and for 3 years she had been the family's punching bag. She wasn't a wife, she was an unpaid housekeeper with a marriage license. "I'm sorry, Patricia," Natalie said softly, her voice steady. "I was dusting the mantel and the cat jumped." "Don't blame the cat," Patricia hissed, looming over her. The older woman was draped in a Chanel suit that was slightly too tight, a desperate attempt to cling to a youth that had fled decades ago. "You are bad luck, Natalie. Pure bad luck. Ever since Brandon brought you into this house, from that orphanage or wherever you came from, Preston Shipping has been in a downward spiral." Natalie placed the shards into a dustpan. A thin line of blood welled on her thumb where a ceramic edge had sliced her skin. She ignored it. If she told them the truth, that Preston Shipping was failing because Brandon was an incompetent gambler and Patricia spent the company's operating capital on galas, they would only scream louder. "Is dinner ready?" a voice drawled from the doorway. It was Chloe, Brandon's younger sister. At 22, Chloe had never worked a day in her life. She stood leaning against the doorframe, scrolling through her phone, not even bothering to look up. "It's in the oven, Chloe. Roast beef with the herb crust you like," Natalie said, standing up and brushing off her knees. "I'm going vegan this week." "God, you never listen," Chloe groaned, rolling her eyes. "Mum, tell her to make me a salad, a kale salad, and not with that cheap dressing she buys." "You heard her," Patricia snapped, turning on her heel. "Fix it. Brandon will be home any minute, and he's bringing a guest. I want this house spotless. If I see one speck of dust, Natalie, you're sleeping in the guest shed again." Natalie walked to the kitchen, the vast, cold heart of the mansion. She washed the blood off her thumb under the tap, wrapping a paper towel around it. She looked out the window at the sprawling lawn. It was raining, a heavy, grey downpour that matched the atmosphere inside the house. She had stayed for love, or what she thought was love. When she met Brandon 3 years ago at a charity library event, he had been charming. He had seemed different from the vultures of the corporate world she dealt with daily. She had hidden her identity to ensure he loved her for her, not her net worth. She had stepped down from the public eye, managing her empire, Orion Global, through proxies and late-night encrypted emails, playing the role of the devoted, simple wife. But the mask was becoming heavy. The charm had worn off Brandon within 6 months. Now, she was just an asset he couldn't liquidate, an anchor he claimed was holding him back. The front door slammed open. Heavy footsteps thundered in the hallway. "Where is she?" Brandon's voice boomed. He sounded drunk or furious. Usually it was both. Natalie dried her hands and walked out to meet him. Brandon stood in the foyer, shaking rain off his bespoke trench coat. He was a handsome man, with a sharp jawline and blonde hair, but his eyes were bloodshot, and his mouth was set in a permanent sneer of dissatisfaction. Beside him stood a woman. She was stunning, tall with raven black hair, wearing a red dress that cost more than the average car. She clung to Brandon's arm, looking around the foyer with a mixture of judgment and greed. "Brandon?" Natalie asked, stopping a few feet away. "Who is this?" Patricia and Chloe came rushing out of the living room. "Oh, Brandon, you're home!" Patricia cooed, her demeanor changing instantly from harpy to doting mother. She looked at the woman in the red dress. "And who is this lovely creature?" "Mother, Chloe," Brandon said, puffing out his chest. "This is Vanessa Thorne. Her father is the CEO of Thorne Heavy Industries." Patricia's eyes widened, dollar signs practically flashing in her pupils. Thorne Heavy Industries was a massive player in the logistics game. A partnership with them would save Preston Shipping from bankruptcy. "Welcome, welcome," Patricia gushed, shoving Natalie aside with her hip to shake Vanessa's hand. "I'm Patricia. This is our home. Please come in." "It's charming," Vanessa said, her voice like silk wrapped around a razor blade. She looked at Natalie, her eyes scanning the plain grey sweater and jeans Natalie wore. "Is this the help?" The room went silent. Brandon didn't correct her. He didn't defend his wife. He just let out a dry, cruel laugh. "Something like that," Brandon said. He looked at Natalie with cold, dead eyes. "Natalie, get Vanessa a drink, a martini, dry, and don't mess it up." Natalie stood frozen for a second. The disrespect wasn't new, but bringing a mistress, a corporate rival's daughter, into their home and ordering his wife to serve her. That was a new low. "I am not the help, Vanessa," Natalie said, her voice calm, but carrying a steel edge she rarely revealed. "I am his wife." Vanessa raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow and looked at Brandon. Awkward. "Not for long," Brandon muttered. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick brown envelope. He tossed it onto the hallway table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Natalie. "What is this?" Natalie asked, though she already knew. "Open it," Brandon commanded. Natalie opened the clasp and pulled out the documents. Petition for dissolution of marriage. "I'm divorcing you, Natalie," Brandon said, wrapping his arm around Vanessa's waist. "I need a partner, a power couple. Vanessa can bring the Thorne contracts to Preston Shipping. She can save this family. You? You just bake cakes and break vases." "You're kicking me out?" Natalie asked. "After I nursed you through your pneumonia, after I managed this household on the allowance you cut 3 times. "Oh, stop the sob story," Chloe chimed in, laughing. "You were a charity case, Natalie. Brandon saved you. Now he's upgrading. It's just business." "It's survival," Patricia added, crossing her arms. "Sign the papers, girl. Don't make this difficult. The prenup you signed says you leave with what you came with, which, if I recall, was absolutely nothing." Natalie looked at the 3 of them, the greedy mother, the lazy sister, the traitorous husband, and then at the smug mistress. "Are you sure about this, Brandon?" Natalie asked, her eyes locking onto his. "Once I signed this, there is no going back. You are cutting ties completely." "That's the point, you idiot," Brandon sneered. "Sign it, then pack your trash and get out. Vanessa is moving in tonight." Natalie looked down at the papers. A strange sense of relief washed over her. She had tried. She had given them 3 years of grace. She had suspended the acquisition of their debt through Orion Global out of loyalty to her vows. But the vows were broken. The grace period was over. "Do you have a pen?" Natalie asked, The scratching of the pen against the paper was the only sound in the room. Natalie signed her name with a flourish. Natalie Preston. Then she paused. She looked at the signature. It felt wrong. It felt like a cage. She handed the papers back to Brandon. "Done," she said. "I'll go pack." "Make it quick," Vanessa said, sipping the martini that Chloe had scurried off to make for her. "I want to turn that master bedroom into something livable. The decor is hideous. Very pedestrian." Natalie walked up the grand staircase. She didn't cry. She felt a cold precision clicking into place in her mind, a mindset she hadn't utilized since she orchestrated the hostile takeover of Bennett Tech 5 years ago. In the bedroom, she didn't pack clothes. She didn't pack the jewelry Brandon had given her, mostly fake cubic zirconia he tried to pass off as diamonds. She went to the back of the closet, to a hidden floor safe beneath a loose board, one place in the house Patricia's prying eyes had never found. She keyed in the code, 0707, the date she started Orion Global. Inside was a single black smartphone, a passport with her maiden name, Natalie Sterling, and a Swiss bank key. She took the phone and turned it on. It buzzed instantly with 3 years of low-priority notifications, and then, as it connected to the secure network, it lit up with urgent messages from her board of directors. She ignored them for a moment and dialed a number she knew by heart. "Orion Global, Executive Office." A crisp male voice answered on the first ring. "Arthur," Natalie said. There was a pause on the other end, a silence so profound it felt like the world stopped. "Ma'am?" The voice trembled slightly. "Ms. Sterling? Is that really you?" "It's me, Arthur. I'm coming in. We thought you were..." "The sabbatical was supposed to be 6 months, Ma'am. It's been 3 years. The board is in a panic. The stock is stable, but rumors are..." "Quiet, Arthur," she commanded gently. The authority came back to her naturally, like riding a bike. "Initiate Protocol Omega." Arthur gasped. "Omega? Ma'am, that's the Scorched Earth Protocol. That's for total liquidation of hostile entities." "Not for Orion," Natalie said, walking over to the window. She saw Brandon and Vanessa down by his Porsche, kissing in the rain. "I want you to pull the file on Preston Shipping and Logistics." Preston Shipping, that small-cap failing firm in the logistics sector. We hold their debt through our subsidiary, Apex Capital. They are 3 months behind on interest payments. We were about to seize their assets, but the directive from your blind trust said to hold off. "The directive is rescinded," Natalie said, her voice dropping an octave. "Call in the debt, all of it. Tonight." "Tonight?" "Ma'am, that will bankrupt them by morning." "I know, and Arthur." "Yes, Ms. Sterling? Cancel the acquisition of Thorn Heavy Industries." "Thorn?" "But the merger is set for next week. The press release is drafted. Cancel it, publicly. Cite ethical concerns regarding leadership. Leak it to the Financial Times within the hour. Understood. Welcome back, boss." Natalie hung up. She slipped the phone into her pocket. She grabbed a small duffel bag and threw in a few essentials, not for sentimental value, but just to keep up the charade for 10 more minutes. She walked downstairs. The family was gathered in the living room, celebrating with a bottle of champagne they had likely bought on credit. "Leaving so soon?" Patricia jeered, raising her glass. "Don't let the door hit you. Actually do. Maybe it'll knock some sense into you." "Here," Brandon said, tossing a wad of cash at her. It hit her chest and fell to the floor. "Cab fare. I'm feeling generous. Go find a shelter." Vanessa laughed, a high, tinkling sound. "Oh, Brandon, you're too kind. She'll probably just spend it on cheap booze." Natalie looked at the money on the floor. She stepped over it. "You should save that, Brandon," Natalie said, stopping at the door. You're going to need every penny." "Get out!" Brandon roared, throwing his glass at the door. It shattered inches from her head. Natalie opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the rain. The storm was raging, soaking her instantly. She walked down the long driveway, the gravel crunching under her worn-out sneakers. She reached the iron gates of the estate. The security guard, old Mr. Henderson, looked at her with pity. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Preston," he muttered, opening the pedestrian gate. "It's Ms. Sterling, Mr. Henderson. And don't worry about me." She stepped onto the public road. Behind her, the lights of the mansion glowed warmly, hiding the rot inside. 2 minutes later, headlights cut through the darkness. But this wasn't a taxi. A convoy of 3 black SUVs, escorted by a Rolls-Royce Phantom, glided silently to a halt next to her. The rear door of the Rolls-Royce opened. A man in an impeccable charcoal suit stepped out, holding a large black umbrella. He rushed over, shielding Natalie from the rain. "Ms. Sterling," Arthur said, bowing his head. He was an older man, distinguished with silver hair. He looked at her wet, cheap clothes with a flash of anger. Not at her, but at the people who had done this. "My apologies for the delay." "Traffic." "It's fine, Arthur," Natalie said. She slid into the back seat of the Rolls-Royce. The interior was warm, smelling of rich leather and jasmine. She sat back, closing her eyes. "Here is the tablet, ma'am," Arthur said, sitting opposite her as the car pulled away. "The transfer of power is ready for your biometric authorization. And I took the liberty of bringing something to wear." He gestured to a garment bag hanging on the hook. Inside was a bespoke white blazer, tailored trousers, and a pair of Louboutins. "Burn these rags," Natalie said, gesturing to her wet sweater. "With pleasure." She placed her hand on the tablet screen. A green light scanned her fingerprint. "Access granted. Welcome, CEO Sterling." "What is the status of the loan recall on Preston Shipping?" she asked, watching the numbers scroll on the screen. "Notices have been sent. Their CFO will receive the default alert in..." Arthur checked his watch. 3 minutes. And the Thorn merger cancellation? Trending on Twitter right now, Thorn's stock has dropped 12% in the last 10 minutes. Natalie smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. "Take me to the penthouse, Arthur. I need a shower. And then set up a meeting for tomorrow morning." "With whom, ma'am?" "With Brandon Preston. He doesn't know it yet. But he's going to be begging for a meeting with the CEO of Orion Global to save his company. Let's grant him an audience." The sun rose over the city, but inside the Preston mansion, the mood was chaotic. Brandon woke up with a hangover, his head pounding. He rolled over, expecting to see Vanessa, but the other side of the bed was empty. He heard shouting downstairs. He threw on a robe and stumbled down the hallway. "What do you mean the accounts are frozen?" Patricia was screaming into a phone in the kitchen. "I am Patricia Preston. Unfreeze them immediately. I have a hair appointment at 10. Brandon walked into the kitchen. "Mum, keep it down. My head is splitting." "Brandon!" Patricia turned, her face pale beneath her night cream. "The credit cards are declined, all of them, even the emergency Amex." "Probably just a glitch," Brandon muttered, pouring himself coffee. "I'll call the bank." "It's not a glitch." Chloe ran into the room, holding her iPad. "Look at this. Have you seen the news?" She shoved the screen in Brandon's face. "Breaking news. Orion Global terminates talks with Thorn Heavy Industries. Thorn stock plummets." "What?" Brandon grabbed the iPad. No, that's impossible. Vanessa said it was a done deal. That merger was going to triple the value of her father's company. That was our leverage." "Where is Vanessa?" Patricia asked, looking around. She left early, I guess," Brandon said, a pit forming in his stomach. He pulled out his phone and dialed Vanessa. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." "She blocked me," Brandon whispered. Suddenly, his phone beeped. An email. High priority. From the legal department of Apex Capital. Brandon opened it. His eyes scanned the legal jargon, his face turning grey. Notice of default and immediate recall of loan. To Preston, shipping and logistics, due to violation of Covenant 4.2, failure to maintain liquidity ratios, and the collapse of your guarantor partner, Thorn Industries, Apex Capital is exercising its right to recall the principal loan of $45 million immediately. Payment is due within 24 hours. Failure to pay will result in immediate seizure of all collateral, including the Preston estate, the warehouse fleet, and personal assets of the signatories. $45 million, Brandon choked out. They want it all. Today. "We don't have $45 million, Patricia shrieked. "We don't even have $45,000 in liquid cash." "Who is Apex Capital?" Chloe asked, trembling. "Who owns them?" Brandon frantically tapped on his phone, searching for Apex Capital. "It's a subsidiary," he muttered, sweat dripping down his forehead. "They are owned by Orion Global." "Orion Global?" Patricia gasped. "The conglomerate? The one that just destroyed Vanessa's father?" "We have to go there," Brandon said, panic seizing him. "We have to go to Orion HQ. We have to beg. If we explain that we are a legacy family, maybe they will give us an extension." "Go! Get dressed!" Patricia yelled. "Wear your best suit. Chloe, get the car. We are going to see the CEO of Orion Global." Orion Global headquarters, the penthouse office. Natalie stood looking out over the city skyline from the top floor of the Orion Tower. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the world she owned. She was no longer the woman in the stained sweater. She wore a sharp, navy blue power suit that cost more than the Preston's car. Her hair was styled in a sleek, professional cut. She wore a Patek Philippe watch on her wrist. She looked powerful. She looked dangerous. Arthur knocked on the glass door and entered. "They are here, Ms. Sterling," Arthur said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "The Preston family. They are in the lobby, demanding to see the CEO. They claim it's a matter of life and death." "How do they look?" Natalie asked, turning around. Desperate, disheveled. Patricia Preston shouted at the receptionist for not offering her sparkling water. Natalie chuckled. "Predictable. They have no idea it's you, do they? Not a clue. They think Natalie the maid is crying in a homeless shelter somewhere. What are your orders?" "Let them wait," Natalie said, sitting down in her massive leather chair behind the mahogany desk. "Let them wait in the lobby for 2 hours. Let them sweat. Let them watch the ticker as their company stock hits 0. And then bring them up. And the room set up." "Dim the lights on my side," Natalie said. "I want to be in the shadows when they walk in. I want them to bow to the CEO before they realize who they are bowing to." "Very good, Mum." Natalie swiveled her chair to face the window again. She remembered the day she met Brandon. She had wanted a simple life. She had wanted a family. They had taken that dream, chewed it up, and spit it out. Now she was going to show them what happens when you wake a sleeping dragon. 2 hours later, Brandon, Patricia, and Chloe sat in the waiting area of the executive floor. They were sweating. Every time an assistant walked by, they jumped. "This is ridiculous," Patricia hissed, fanning herself with a magazine. "Do they know who we are?" "They know we are broke, Mom," Brandon snapped. "Shut up." Mr. Preston, a tall woman with glasses, stood at the double doors. "The CAO will see you now." Brandon shot up, straightening his tie. Okay, this is it. Remember, be humble. We need mercy. I'm always humble, Patricia huffed, grabbing her purse. They followed the assistant down a long, intimidating hallway lined with modern art. They reached the massive double doors at the end. The assistant opened them. The office was cavernous. A long table stretched across the room. At the far end, behind a massive desk, a figure sat in a high-backed leather chair. The figure was turned away, facing the window. Mr. CAO? Brandon stammered, walking forward. The room was intimidatingly quiet. Thank you for seeing us, Patricia added, putting on her fake society voice. We are the Prestons, a pillar of this community. The chair did not move. We are here about the loan recall, Brandon continued, his voice shaking. There has been a mistake. We are good for the money. We just need time. If you seize our assets, you destroy 100-year-old legacy. Legacy, a voice said from the chair. Brandon froze. The voice, it sounded familiar. But it couldn't be. It was authoritative, cold, powerful. You speak of legacy, the voice continued. But a legacy is built on integrity, on loyalty, on how you treat people when you think no one is watching. Excuse me? Patricia asked, offended. We treat everyone with respect. Is that so? The chair slowly began to swivel. We are prepared to offer you equity, Brandon said desperately. We can give you 20% of the company. I don't want 20%, the voice said. I already own the debt. I own you. The chair fully rotated. Sitting there, fingers steeped in front of her, was Natalie. But it wasn't the Natalie they knew. It was a queen sitting on her throne. Brandon's jaw dropped. His knees actually buckled, and he grabbed the back of a chair for support. Patricia let out a strangled gasp, dropping her purse. You? What are you doing here? Did you get a job as the secretary? Natalie didn't answer. She simply pressed a button on her desk. The blinds behind her rose, flooding the room with light, illuminating the nameplate on her desk. Natalie Sterling, Chief Executive Officer, Orion Global. Hello, Brandon, Natalie said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Welcome to my world. No, Brandon whispered. No, this isn't real. You scrubbed my floors. You're an orphan. I am an orphan, Natalie agreed. My parents were Richard and Martha Sterling. They founded Orion Global. When they died, I inherited it all. I wanted to see if a man could love me for me, not my billions. So I became Natalie Preston. She stood up, and the Prestons shrank back. And you showed me exactly who you are, she said, her voice rising. You humiliated me. You cheated on me. You kicked me out into the rain like garbage. Natalie, wait, Brandon stammered, stepping forward, his mind racing. If she was the CEO, that meant they were still married. That meant he was rich. Baby, please, it was a mistake. Vanessa, she meant nothing. I was stressed. I love you. We are husband and wife. Actually, Natalie said, picking up a document from her desk, we aren't. She held up the divorce papers. You signed these yesterday, and I filed them this morning. Expedited. The judge granted it an hour ago. But the assets, Patricia screamed. We are entitled to half. You were married for 3 years. Read the prenup, Patricia, Natalie said coldly. The one you forced me to sign. What did it say? Each party leaves with the assets they brought into the marriage. You insisted on it to protect your pathetic little shipping company. Patricia's face went white. She remembered. She had made the lawyers draft it so tight that Natalie couldn't get a dime of Preston money. That prenup, Natalie said, walking around the desk, protects my $200 billion from your greed. $200 billion, Chloe squeaked, looking like she was going to faint. "Now," Natalie said, her face hardening. "About that debt. Since you cannot pay, Apex Capital is seizing the Preston estate effective immediately. You have until 5 p.m. to vacate the premises. Whatever is left inside becomes my property." "You can't do this," Brandon cried, tears streaming down his face. "That house is in our family for 4 generations." "And you lost it in 3 years," Natalie said. "Security." 2 massive guards entered the room. "Escort these trespassers out of my building," Natalie ordered, turning her back on them. "And if they resist, call the police." "Natalie, please!" Brandon screamed as the guards grabbed him. "I love you. I'm sorry." "Natalie!" Patricia wailed. Natalie stared out the window, listening to their screams fade down the hallway. She picked up her phone. "Arthur?" "Yes, Ms. Sterling?" "Send a cleaning crew to the Preston estate. Tell them to throw everything in the driveway, in black trash bags." The elevator ride down from the penthouse felt like a descent into hell. Brandon, Patricia, and Chloe stood in silence, flanked by the 2 burly security guards. The digital numbers on the display ticked down, 50, 49, 48, marking the seconds remaining of their life as they knew it. When the doors slid open in the lobby, the guards didn't just politely ask them to leave. One of them, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, grabbed Brandon by the elbow. Hard. "This way," he grunted, steering them toward the revolving doors. "Get your hands off me," Brandon snapped, trying to regain a shred of dignity. "I can walk myself. I am a Preston." "You're a trespasser," the guard corrected, shoving him out onto the busy sidewalk. Patricia and Chloe stumbled out behind him, clutching their expensive handbags like life preservers. The humiliation was instant. It was lunchtime in the financial district. Dozens of people, bankers, analysts, former colleagues, were walking by. Many of them stopped. Phones were raised. The flashes of cameras went off. "Isn't that Brandon Preston?" Someone whispered loud enough to be heard. "The guy whose company just tanked?" "That's Patricia Preston," another voice laughed. "She looks like she's seen a ghost." "Come on, keep moving," Brandon hissed, shielding his face with his hand. "We need to get to the car." They hurried to the parking garage where they had left the company Mercedes. Brandon fumbled for his keys, his hand shaking violently. He pressed the unlock button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. Silence. "Open, damn it!" he screamed, kicking the tire. A tow truck was already backing up toward the vehicle. A man in a jumpsuit hopped out, holding a clipboard. "Step away from the vehicle, sir," the driver said, chewing on a toothpick. "This is my car," Brandon yelled. "Not anymore. License plate matches the asset seizure list sent over by Apex Capital about 20 minutes ago. It's repossession time." "You can't take our car," Patricia shrieked, rushing forward. "How are we supposed to get home?" "Bus stop is on 5th and Main," the driver said, unbothered. He hooked the chains under the bumper. "Or you can call a cab." "Oh wait, I heard your cards were declined." He laughed, a rough, gravelly sound that grated on Brandon's nerves. The tow truck hoisted the Mercedes into the air. As it drove away, dragging their last symbol of status with it, Chloe burst into tears. "My charger was in there," she wailed, "and my makeup bag." "Shut up, Chloe," Brandon roared. He felt like his head was going to explode. He looked at his mother and sister. "We have to get a taxi. I have that cash." He patted his pockets. He froze. The wad of cash he had thrown at Natalie the night before. The cab fare he had insulted her with. He had left it on the floor of the foyer. He didn't have a single dollar on him. "Mum?" Brandon asked, his voice trembling. "Do you have any cash?" Patricia rummaged through her purse. She pulled out a tube of lipstick, a compact mirror, and 3 quarters. 3 quarters, Brandon said flatly. "I don't carry cash, Brandon. That's for poor people, Patricia snapped. They stood on the sidewalk, stranded. The sky began to darken again, threatening another storm. Vanessa, Brandon said suddenly, his eyes lighting up. Vanessa will help us. She has resources. Her father is still powerful, even with the stock drop. She loves me. He grabbed Chloe's phone, the only one that still had a signal, as it was on a prepaid plan she used for burner accounts. He dialed Vanessa's number again. To his surprise, she answered. What do you want, Brandon? Her voice was cold, stripped of the sultry warmth she had used on him for months. Vanessa, thank God. Listen, it's a nightmare. Natalie, she's the CEO of Orion. She took everything. The accounts, the car. We're stranded downtown. You need to come pick us up. We can go to your penthouse. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a low chuckle. My penthouse? Vanessa laughed. Brandon, you really are dense. My father just fired me. What? The failed merger, the public embarrassment, the leaked emails about our affair. Natalie Sterling destroyed my reputation in an hour. My father cut me off to save the company's stock. I'm packing my bags to go to Europe until this blows over. Wait, you're leaving? Brandon felt the ground sway beneath him. But what about us? We're a power couple. There is no us without the power, Brandon, Vanessa sneered. I didn't date you for your personality. You're weak. You let a woman like Natalie play you for a fool for 3 years. Do you really think I want to be anchored to a sinking ship? Don't call me again. The line went dead. Brandon lowered the phone slowly. He looked at Patricia and Chloe, who were watching him with hopeful eyes. She's coming, right? Chloe asked. She hung up, Brandon whispered. Patricia's face twisted in rage. That little tramp. I knew she was no good. I told you, Brandon. I told you she had shifty eyes. You told me she was a lovely creature, Brandon shouted back. Stop fighting, Chloe screamed, stomping her foot. I'm hungry, and it's starting to rain again. The long walk home. They walked. It took them 4 hours to walk the 10 miles back to the Preston estate. By the time they arrived, the sun was setting, casting long, ominous shadows across the driveway. Their feet were blistered. Their expensive clothes were sweat-stained and wrinkled. Patricia's hair had collapsed into a frizzy mess. They trudged up the long driveway, hoping that maybe, just maybe, Natalie had been bluffing about the eviction. But as they rounded the bend, they saw it. The front gates were wide open. The front door of the mansion was open. A crew of movers in blue coveralls was swarming the house like ants on a sugar cube. And there, right in the middle of the beautiful circular driveway, sat a mountain of black plastic trash bags. My clothes, Chloe gasped, running forward. She ripped open a bag. It was filled with her designer dresses, her shoes, her coats, all jammed in haphazardly. They're wrinkled. They're ruined. Patricia ran to another pile. My furs! They put my mink in a garbage bag. Brandon didn't run to the bags. He walked toward the front door. He tried to step inside, but a large man in a suit blocked his path. It wasn't the security from the office. This was a sheriff's deputy. Can I help you, son? The deputy asked, hand resting on his belt. I live here, Brandon said, though his voice lacked conviction. Not according to this writ of possession, the deputy said, tapping a piece of paper taped to the doorframe. Property now belongs to Apex Capital. Locks have been changed. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal effects from the driveway and vacate the premises. If you step on this property after that, you will be arrested for trespassing. Where are we supposed to go? Brandon asked, his voice cracking. The deputy shrugged. Not my problem. Move along. Brandon turned back to his family. Patricia was sitting on a pile of trash bags, weeping openly, clutching a framed photo of herself. Chloe was trying to drag 3 bags at once, slipping on the gravel. It began to rain. Orion Global Headquarters, 8 p.m. Natalie sat in her office, nursing a glass of sparkling water. The city lights twinkled below her, a sea of diamonds that she owned a significant part of. The large screen on her wall was playing the evening news. In a shocking turn of events, the Preston shipping empire has collapsed today, following a recall of loans by Apex Capital. Sources say the family has been evicted from their historic estate. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Sterling. It was Hayes, her executive assistant. Go ahead, Hayes. There is a visitor. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says she has information you might want. She says her name is Vanessa Thorne. Natalie raised an eyebrow. The audacity. Send her up. A few minutes later, Vanessa walked in. She looked different. The arrogance was still there, but it was brittle. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She wore a trench coat and sunglasses, trying to look incognito. Ms. Thorne, Natalie said, not standing up. To what do I owe the displeasure? Vanessa took off her sunglasses. I'm not here to fight, Natalie. It's Ms. Sterling. Fine. Ms. Sterling, I'm here to make a deal. I don't make deals with home wreckers, Natalie said calmly, but I am curious. What could you possibly have that I would want? I have Brandon's ledger, Vanessa said. Natalie paused. Explain. Brandon wasn't just incompetent, Vanessa said, stepping closer to the desk. He was crooked. For the last year, he's been cooking the books at Preston Shipping to hide losses from the bank. But he was also siphoning money. Not much, just enough to gamble with. He moved it to offshore accounts in the Caymans. I know where the accounts are. I know the passwords. And why would you give this to me? Because he dragged me down with him, Vanessa hissed. My father fired me. I'm a laughingstock. I want to see Brandon buried. I want to see him in prison. Natalie studied the other woman. Vanessa was a snake, willing to bite anyone to survive. But a snake could be useful if pointed in the right direction. If Brandon committed fraud, Natalie said slowly, that voids the limited liability protections. It means he is personally liable for the corporate debt. It means he goes to jail. Exactly, Vanessa smiled, a cruel, sharp expression. I give you the ledger. You give me a consulting fee, enough to start over in Paris. Natalie swiveled her chair slightly. You want me to pay you for betraying your lover? He wasn't my lover. He was a mark, just like you were his mark. We aren't so different, you and I. We are very different, Natalie said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I built an empire. You just sleep with the men who run them. Vanessa flinched, her face flushing red. However, Natalie continued, I am interested in justice. If Brandon stole from the company, he stole from me, since I own the debt. She pressed the intercom button. Hayes, have legal draft a whistleblower agreement for Ms. Thorne. Standard non-disclosure. One-time payment of $50,000. $50,000? Vanessa scoffed. I want $5 million. Take it or leave it, Natalie said, picking up a pen. In 5 seconds the offer is $0, and I'll have security throw you out just like I did the Prestons. Vanessa glared at her, her hands clenching. She looked at the door, then back at Natalie. Fine, she spat. I'll take it. The motel. The Starlight Inn was anything but starry. It was a run-down motel on the edge of the industrial district, where the neon sign buzzed incessantly and the carpet smelled of stale smoke and regret. Brandon sat on the edge of the sagging mattress. The room had 2 double beds. Patricia and Chloe had taken one, leaving him the other. The room was cramped, filled with the few trash bags they had managed to salvage. Patricia was pacing the small strip of carpet between the beds. "This is unacceptable," she muttered. "I saw a cockroach, Brandon, in the bathroom." "It's one night, Mum," Brandon said, his head in his hands. "I'll figure something out tomorrow." "How?" Chloe asked from under the covers. "You don't have a job, you don't have a car, you don't even have a wife anymore." "I have a plan," Brandon said, standing up. A manic desperation was taking hold of him. "Natalie, she thinks she's won. But she forgot one thing." "What?" Patricia stopped pacing. "We were married for 3 years. In this state, spousal support laws are tricky, but more importantly, I know secrets about her." "What secrets?" Patricia asked. "She was a mute maid for 3 years." "She wasn't always," Brandon said, his eyes narrowing. "I remember, early on, before the wedding, she used to get letters, handwritten letters, from a place in Switzerland. I thought they were from a pen pal. But if she's the CEO of Orion, those letters were probably bank statements, illegal, undeclared offshore accounts." So, Brandon smiled, a jagged, desperate grin. "If we can prove she was hiding assets during the marriage, the divorce decree might be invalid. We could reopen the case. We could sue for half of Orion Global." "Do you really think that will work?" Patricia asked, her greed warring with her skepticism. "It has to," Brandon said. "It's our only shot. I need a lawyer. Not the corporate stiff we used. I need a shark. Someone who hates Orion Global." He grabbed the phone book. Yes, the motel still had a physical phone book, and flipped to the yellow pages. He found an ad that took up a whole page. "Jagger and Associates. We fight the giants. No fee unless you win." "Jagger," Brandon muttered. "I remember him. He sued Orion last year for an environmental case. He lost, but he hates them." He picked up the motel phone. "What are you doing?" Patricia asked. "I'm declaring war," Brandon said. He dialed the number. It was late, but the ad said 24/7 hotline. "Jagger Law," a bored voice answered. "This is Brandon Preston," he said, trying to sound important. "I am the ex-husband of Natalie Sterling, the CIO of Orion Global, and I have information that can bring her down." The line went silent for a moment. Then the tone changed. "Hold for Mr. Jagger." Brandon looked at his mother and sister. "Pack your bags, ladies," Brandon whispered. "We aren't staying in this dump for long." Little did he know, he was playing checkers while Natalie was playing 4D chess, and the ledger Vanessa had just sold to Natalie was about to turn his civil lawsuit into a criminal indictment. The war hadn't ended. It had just entered the most dangerous phase. The law office of Jagger and Associates was located in a strip mall between a pawn shop and a 24-hour donut store. It smelled of stale coffee and desperation, but to Brandon Preston, it looked like a command center. "So, let me get this straight," Jagger said, leaning back in a chair that creaked alarmingly under his weight. He was a small man, with slicked-back hair and a suit that was 2 sizes too big. "She's a billionaire. She hid it. You signed a prenup, and now you want to sue her for fraud?" "It's deception," Brandon insisted, slamming his hand on the cheap laminate desk. "She presented herself as a pauper. That is false pretenses. Material misrepresentation. If I had known she was the CEO of Orion Global, I never would have signed that prenup." "Right," Jagger grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. "Because you would have wanted a piece of the pie. I like it. It's dirty. It's desperate. And it might just work if we can find a judge who hates big corporations. I also know she has offshore accounts," Brandon lied, embellishing the theory he had cooked up in the motel room. "Switzerland, Caymans. She was moving money during our marriage. That's marital assets, right? If she moved a single dime of marital income into a hidden account, we can void the prenup," Jagger said, sitting up. "Mr. Preston, I'll take the case. but I need a retainer. 5,000. I don't have 5,000, Brandon stammered. Patricia stepped forward, pulling a diamond ring off her finger. It was the last real piece of jewelry she had hidden from the repo men. Take this. It's worth 10. Jagger snatched the ring, holding it up to the light. We'll call it even. I'll file the injunction in the morning. We're going to freeze her assets. Orion Global Headquarters. 2 days later, the summons arrived. It didn't come by regular mail. A process server threw it at the reception desk in the lobby of Orion Tower, shouting, "You've been served!" before running away as if he expected to be shot. Winston, Natalie's chief of legal counsel, who had taken over day-to-day operations while Arthur handled the transition, brought the document to the penthouse. "It's a lawsuit, Ms. Sterling," Winston said, placing the thick packet on her desk. He looked amused. "Brandon Preston versus Natalie Sterling. He's suing for 50% of Orion Global, alleging fraudulent inducement into marriage and concealment of marital assets." Natalie didn't look up from her laptop. "Who is representing him?" "Jagger, a strip mall ambulance chaser. He's known for filing frivolous suits to get nuisance settlements." Natalie finally laughed. It was a genuine, hearty laugh. "He thinks he can sue me? After I spared him from jail time for the moment?" "He claims you have hidden offshore accounts," Winston continued. "He's demanding a full forensic audit of Orion's books." Natalie stood up and walked to the window. The rain had cleared, leaving the city sharp and bright. "He wants an audit," she said softly. "Careful what you wish for, Brandon." She turned back to Winston. "Accept the suit. Expedite the hearing. I don't want to settle. I want to go to court." "Are you sure, Ma'am? It will be public. The press will be there." "I'm counting on it," Natalie said. "Brandon thinks he's hunting a rabbit. He doesn't realize he's walking into a lion's den." "Did you process the evidence Ms. Vanessa provided?" "Yes, Ma'am. The forensic team verified the ledger. Brandon didn't just mismanage Preston Shipping. He was systematically embezzling loans secured by Orion. It's grand larceny, wire fraud, and bank fraud." "Excellent," Natalie said, her eyes cold. "He wants to talk about hidden money in court. Let's talk about hidden money. Prepare the counter-filing. But seal it until the trial. I want the element of surprise." The night before the trial. The atmosphere in the Starlight Inn was jubilant. Jagger had called Brandon to tell him the judge had granted an emergency hearing due to the high-profile nature of the case. "We've got her on the run," Brandon cheered, drinking a cheap beer. She didn't try to dismiss it. That means she's scared. She knows we're onto her Swiss accounts. "We're going to be rich again," Patricia squealed, looking at herself in the cracked mirror. "I saw a penthouse on Park Avenue. I'm going to buy it in cash, and I'm going to fire all the maids just for fun." "I want a pony," Chloe added, scrolling on her phone. "And a new nose." "Focus," Brandon said, pacing the room. "Tomorrow we have to look the part. We need to look like victims. Victims of a heartless, manipulative billionaire who tricked a simple, loving husband." "I can cry on command," Patricia offered. "Good. Jagger says if we play this right, the public opinion will force her to settle. She won't want her financial secrets exposed. She'll cut a check for $1 billion just to make us go away." Brandon lay back on the lumpy bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. He truly believed his own lies. In his mind, he was the hero. He had convinced himself that Natalie was the villain, that she had mocked him by hiding her wealth. He didn't sleep that night. He spent the hours rehearsing his victory speech. Across town, in the penthouse suite, Natalie slept soundly. Her conscience was clear. She had given Brandon every chance to be a decent man. Now, she was simply the instrument of his fate. The courtroom was a circus of flashing cameras and murmuring reporters. Brandon sat smugly next to Jagger, his sleazy strip mall lawyer, convinced he was moments away from $1 billion settlement. When Natalie entered, she didn't look like a defendant. She looked like an executioner dressed in white silk. "Your Honor," Jagger bellowed, playing to the crowd, "Ms. Sterling committed fraud. She hid her vast wealth to trap my client in a prenup. We demand a full forensic audit of her offshore holdings." Natalie's lawyer, Mr. Blackwood, stood up slowly, a predatory smile on his face. "We welcome an audit, Your Honor. In fact, we've already conducted one, but not on Ms. Sterling." He dropped a heavy binder onto the judge's bench with a thud that silenced the room. "This audit concerns Preston Shipping. It proves that Mr. Preston didn't just mismanage the company, he embezzled $12 million of Orion's loan money into a private Cayman account." Brandon leapt to his feet. "That's a lie." "The defense calls Vanessa Thorne," Blackwood announced. The color drained from Brandon's face as Vanessa walked in. She didn't look at him. She looked only at the exit, desperate to save her own skin. On the stand, her testimony was a dagger to the heart. "He made me cook the books," Vanessa confessed coldly. "He called it his war chest. He told me Natalie was a useful idiot. He would bleed dry before dumping." Patricia shrieked from the gallery. "You liar! Order!" Judge Hargrave roared, slamming his gavel. He looked at the trembling Jagger. "Counselor, did you know your client was using this court to facilitate federal bank fraud?" "I withdraw," Jagger yelled, physically backing away from Brandon. "I'm out." "This is no longer a civil dispute," the judge declared, his eyes locking onto a terrified Brandon. "Bailiff, bar the doors. The FBI is waiting in the hallway." The cold click of handcuffs echoed through the silent courtroom, louder than any gavel. "Brandon Preston, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud and embezzlement," the lead FBI agent announced, spinning Brandon around. Panic seized Brandon. He thrashed against the agents, looking wildly at the gallery. "Mom! Chloe! Do something! Tell them who we are! Get Jagger back here!" But the Prestons were already retreating. Patricia shielded her face with her handbag, shouting to the cameras, "He's a disgrace! I have no son! We knew nothing about this!" Chloe didn't even look up. She was frantically deleting photos of him from her social media, severing ties to save her own reputation. The loyalty they claimed to value evaporated the moment the check bounced. Natalie watched the chaotic scene with a calm detachment. She didn't smile. This wasn't a game to her. It was a correction. As the agents hauled a weeping, broken Brandon out the side door, she gathered her files and stood up. Reporters swarmed the aisle, microphones thrust in her direction. "Ms. Sterling, do you have a statement for your ex-husband?" Natalie paused, smoothing the lapel of her white blazer. She looked directly into the lens. "Arrogance has a high price," she said simply. And today, the bill came due. 6 months later, the reality was stark. Brandon sat in a grey cell, trading his bespoke suits for a faded orange jumpsuit, facing a 10-year sentence. His war chest in the Caymans had been seized by the feds. Patricia and Chloe, stripped of the estate and their social standing, were forced into a cramped, rented apartment, working the very service jobs they had once mocked Natalie for doing. Far above the city, in the Orion penthouse, Natalie signed the final paperwork to dissolve Preston Shipping. She stood at the window, looking out at a horizon that finally belonged to her. The storm was over. She was free. The downfall of the Preston family serves as a brutal reminder. Arrogance is a debt that is always collected in the end. Brandon thought he was the king of his castle, mistreating the one person who actually held the keys to the kingdom. He mistook silence for weakness and kindness for stupidity. In his pursuit of more money, more status, more women, He lost the only thing that was real. Natalie proved that true power doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to belittle others. True power is patient. And when it finally strikes, it doesn't just break you, it erases you. I hope you enjoyed this satisfying story of instant karma and justice. It just goes to show, never judge a book by its cover, or a wife by her apron. If this story got your heart racing, please give the video a massive thumbs up. It really helps us create more drama-filled content for you. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Patricia and Chloe deserved to end up with nothing? Or were they victims of Brandon too? Let's get a debate going. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you're the first to hear our next story. Until next time, be kind and watch who you step on. They might just own the pavement.